This is In Studio. I'm Jay Daniels. Our guest this week is Grammy-nominated vocalist and composer Tierney Sutton. Along with the Tierney Sutton Band, she recently completed the album ScreenPlay. It features a number of classic works from film, including The Windmills of Your Mind, If I Only Had a Brain, and 3 original compositions from Clint Eastwood's Sully. Recently, I spoke with Tierney about the project and how some of the films have been an inspiration upon her career. Here's Tierney Sutton.
As I think about the films that really imprinted themselves in my conscious and subconscious mind, virtually all of them had a strong musical component. I've often said my favorite film is Harold and Maude, and that has, that Cat Stevens score is throughout it, and it's that score is almost like a character in that film. And then I remember that the very first film I ever saw in a theater was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and the hit from that was Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, which I remember being my favorite song at that time.
Yeah.
And then I think of other films. Working on this project made me think so much about this. And I am not a person that goes out of my way to see films that are traumatic, usually. I don't like to go see war films. I'm not a big science fiction person or superheroes or any of that kind of thing. And I think of films that I remember the songs as much as the films. The Wizard of Oz as a kid, all the music in that, all that great Arlen Yip Harburg music. And then later on, so many things that the Bergmans wrote for. Tootsie, I remember sitting in the theater and hearing It Might Be You in the main title at the end of that film and tearing up and thinking what a beautiful song it was. I remember where I was. And so I've come to realize that a huge part of my brain remembers films because of the music, because of the songs. Bridges of Madison County, which has all sorts of great classic jazz. Irene Krall is in there. I remember hearing that and thinking, wow, this is great. And so later getting to work with Clint Eastwood was, a real dream come true. So it's funny. I love film, but the ones that really stick in my mind are films that employ music in a real specific way.
And just yesterday, I might be a little bit late to the ball on this one. I was watching a Sidney Poitier classic, To Sir with Love.
Oh, I remember that very well. And I remember that song. That's a great example. Remember it very well.
And the funny thing is, Tierney, I had heard that song as a kid on oldies radio, but never knew, the reason that this song was written was because of a film that also had Lulu in the picture. And, there were some wonderful themes, a wonderful plot in that movie. And a lot of the films that you mentioned, Butch Cassidy, The Wizard of Oz, several others, they all had wonderful stories. Were there some themes within those stories that connected with you?
Sure. The songs that were originally standards were almost universally from musicals. And recently, many of those songs, and even in the 30s and 40s, Berlin, Cole Porter, these guys wrote a lot of those famous songs for film. So, movies have provided a lot of the songs that became the Great American Songbook, even from its earliest days.
Sure.
And talking to Alan Bergman and Marilyn Bergman about what it is to write specifically for film is really fascinating. Like in the case of Windmills of Your Mind, they told me that basically they were asked to write something that would underscore the anxiety and inability to sleep and, tension of the main character. So the song is not just a random series of things. It's supposed to be, a meditation on anxiety and insomnia, basically. And once I understood that, the song has a really different meaning to me now.
You touch on that a great bit through your latest recording, the album ScreenPlay. Had the great pleasure of listening to several of the tracks from that before this interview, and you really do explore that connection between music and film. And if we can just kind of go over some details for that, you actually have ScreenPlay itself is divided into 5 acts. And you mentioned the Bergmans. One of the acts is the Bergman Suite, followed by Technicolor, the Golden Age, Montage, and the Sully Variations, which actually are some of your own works. I know that our time is limited, but give us a little bit of background, a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. The initial concept for the album, ScreenPlay, of course, you're wanting to feature music from films. But out of all the music from the history of film, in the 20th century especially, how is it that you arrived at the songs that you have? And really, where did the idea come from to divide these into specifically these 5 acts that were mentioned?
Well, there's so many places you can go starting with film. And in the end, it seemed like the best way to break it up was the Bergmans, who are dear friends, and I've been working with them for many, many years, singing songs of theirs that have not been recorded before. I've done shows with Alan singing with him. And so they're very dear to me and to the whole band. So we knew we wanted to do a bunch of their work. Then expanding, we wanted to definitely do some of our own that we wrote for Sully, because 2 songs were written for that, and Christian wrote beautiful score, and we did a lot of arranging together for that film. Then we had all of these other songs that ended up being really elegantly separatable or organizable into the eras from which they come. So the other 3 acts, basically, Technicolor is songs from the 30s and 40s. Golden Age is songs from the 50s and 60s. And Montage is songs from the 70s and 80s. So they're basically divided into eras. So think of those 3 in the center as Great American Songbook from film, basically.
As I was listening to these tracks, I have to admit there was a bit of nostalgia, because I think out of the entire lot, my favorite song would have to be "If I Only Had a Brain." And we have all seen, we've all heard the Ray Bolger recording with Judy Garland from The Wizard of Oz. And I don't know, and this seemed to be the case with a lot of the recordings that you made. You were able to, along with the Tierney Sutton Band, you were able to make your own sound for these classics, and yet it was very tastefully done. And I think the original spirit was kept within those recordings. But If I Only Had a Brain, for instance, had a very funky bass line groove, and I could not help but just be entranced the entire time. You know, these are cherished classics.
Right.
People have known them for many, many years. You and I have grown up with these songs. How do you then take these songs that were done a certain way in the film, in the original release, and how do you make it relevant and fresh for audiences in 2019?
I think that that's always what the band strives to do. With a song like If I Only Had a Brain, I refer to that as a DNA song. It's a song that people know kind of in their DNA, but my theory is that, for example, they may know the song, but they haven't really thought about those lyrics and how wonderfully clever and funny and brilliant they are. And when it's put in a different frame, you see it differently. And so I think that, you know, giving a frame for the song that is more contemporary and puts it in a different place helps illuminate something else about the song that people might not have noticed before.
Our guest on In Studio is Tierney Sutton, the Grammy-nominated vocalist who, with the Tierney Sutton Band, just released the album ScreenPlay, and it's a wonderful project highlighting great musical moments from the history of film. And Tierney, I suppose it's too easy to just do a cover of songs, you know? But someone said, how do you add something to the conversation? And I want to talk about the musicality of your album. As you mentioned, you and the band are always looking for ways to innovate, to invent. And these arrangements are quite original. Was there a process that you and the musicians had when you approached these songs as far as how to craft the arrangement? I mean, what was your thinking going into this?
You know, we've been doing this for 25 years together, and we're all arrangers, and sometimes we create our arrangements together on the spot when we're on the road, or we go into the studio and improvise on a song for a while. Often one of us brings in a core idea, and with this project, each of us brought in ideas. Each of us chose a song or two that we wanted to take on, and in doing so, had the jumping off point for the band. In some cases, like Christian's arrangements for Grease, those were kind of completed, and the band made small alterations, but mostly they were pretty much his idea. The same with my arrangement for Windmills of Your Mind, and then others of Trey Henry's were mostly complete by the time we went into record. So it's a process of knowing one another, of delegating responsibility to different people, because we're not always in the same room all the time. But working together as long as we have a shorthand and we know what to do. So,
and that's one thing that your group is well known for, is it's working together. There have been many cases in the past where essentially an ensemble was led by a certain figure. That figure said, "Here's the arrangement, let's roll with it." And yet, you are able to allow each of the musicians to have an active role, not just in performance, but in the creation of the music. And do you find that that's representative in general of jazz music?
I think that is representative of the tradition of jazz music, for sure. And when you think of an album, for example, the most famous and successful jazz album of all time, Kind of Blue, is every bit as much a Bill Evans album as it is a Miles Davis album. So, the tradition of jazz has been the improvisational coming together of equals to have a conversation about something. And that's the way my band has always functioned. We're also incorporated and legal partners. So I also chose to set it up that way from early on, that they would be invested in a specific and serious way, an official way. So this is both a musical philosophy and, as my dad used to say, people will do anything except give you some of their money. So this is an official financial business, everything relationship that we've set up that way. So it's a kind of deep thing.
If I can get philosophical for a moment, I'd love being able to talk with musicians about this, because we're always looking for ways that we can grow, that we can better ourselves. And this has been a very labor-intensive project, and obviously there have been many that you and the band have done over the years. But when you look at the work that has gone into ScreenPlay specifically, would you say that there are some ways that you have actually been able to grow as an artist? Every project I think gives you the opportunity and the necessity to grow. Otherwise, why would you do it? And I think one of the things about the band and how we work together is I think there's always a sense that we want to challenge one another. On this particular project, I did had a few of the arrangements that I sort of did a little bit more independently, and sort of felt
a little more strongly about some of that than maybe I had in the past, and that felt good. But I think the nature of how we work as a band is that we're always, putting something out there and moving on to the next thing. That's how it is, I think, for musicians.
This album is primarily made up of music from what would be considered the past, music that has been preserved for many, many years. So when you were speaking with students that are coming up through the ranks, ones that are in their late teens, their 20s, or maybe even older, regardless of the age, though, what is it that you hope to impart to them that would hopefully give them that appreciation for this kind of music as well? I know it's a broad question, but I hope you can make some sense of it.
I think that the very simple thing is to expose them to the music. Younger people often haven't studied or really looked into some of the great classic music, and it's often just enough to let them hear it.
We've talked about the importance of music and film, but I want to ask you one final question, more or less as far as explaining the connection with music in your own life, why it's important to you. And the question is just simply two words, and you may answer it as you want. Why music?
Well, I don't think at this point I have any choice. It's what I do. It's, for lack of a better word, it's my calling. And if I'm not touring and if I'm not recording, I'm going to be creating new things in my house and inviting friends over to actualize them, even if nobody hears them. So I think you get to a point where it's your way of life, and it's just the process that you're used to doing, and it's really what gives me satisfaction and joy and makes me feel like I'm where I need to be.
And I know that your schedule is keeping you very busy over the coming weeks as you not only promote ScreenPlay but also tour the country and sharing your music with others. And I know that it's a busy schedule for you today as well, Tierney, and certainly do appreciate your taking the time to stop by and visit with us and for sharing your stories behind the music. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Tierney Sutton, our guest for this week in studio. For more information on the Tierney Sutton Band and their ScreenPlay release, visit the website TierneySutton.com. Of course, you can hear some of the tracks from ScreenPlay during our summer specials from Simply Timeless. Until next time, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.